What's up, everyone? Welcome down to the vault. And as the Bay Area slew of musicians come through our door here in the vault, I have yet another one, another legend. Of course, you probably say, well, Zetro, you say that about most of them, but they are, and that's just the way it is. Most of the people that I've talked to or am talking to had a piece to do with Bay Area thrash metal. If you had anything to do with Bay Area thrash metal, then you are a fucking legend. So across from me right now is a fucking legend, and we are happy to have the first. I've read your comments. Finally, the first guy from Heathen, Mr. Dave White.
Hey, what's up?
How you doing, man?
I'm good.
Good to have you.
Really good.
Good to have. You don't know, I get a lot of comments on my show, and they're constantly telling me who I need to interview next. You know what I mean? Not necessarily asking me, saying, Zetro, you need to get this guy, and you need to get this guy. So we've been on for about 6 months. We've got a pretty good line of people, but we're going to keep getting more and more, and today's no different. Great to have you in, man.
Great to be here. Always
Awesome.
Good to hang out.
It's always good to have out. Kind of cool on my creepy little bazaar that I got going on here.
It's appropriate.
So you're I'd say all of us that did do this thing, or this thing that we all do, you did it a lot earlier than a lot of us. Most people didn't even know. You know, you were doing it in the late 70s, early 80s.
Yeah, that's true. With Blind Illusion.
That's what I'm saying. I didn't even start Legacy till 83, 84. So, you know, again, you had already had that going. I'm sure some of the other thrash bands, maybe besides Exodus, but you had done that. Now, what I want you to talk about, Dave, is when you were growing up, what got the sound going? Was your parents into music, and there's always, like, you know, because we're all probably the same age, you know. Cy was born in 64, so we're probably all in the same little pocket there of the type of music maybe that our parents were listening to or whatever. Was that the case with you?
Well, I'd say the case was more, you know, as a young guy, as a kid, my sister, she's about 6 years older than me. So as a little kid, she was listening, you know, it was the 60s. So she was listening to the Beatles and the Rolling Stones.
Sure.
Animals, stuff like that.
I do hear that a lot of people say their older brother or sister, not necessarily their parents, were the influence for them to get into music, let alone, you know, this type of music.
Right. So she would play all kinds of music, and at an early age, you know, watching like the Beatles cartoon.
I remember that. Oh yeah,
and the Monkees.
Yeah.
I was like, I want to be a drummer.
Yeah.
I want to play drums, and I had a little drum set that had Tiger on it. I thought it was badass shit, you know. And I used to, like, my sister would put on tunes, and I'd get her hairbrush and, like, sing to my sister, you know, Beatles songs and stuff. That's when I first started doing it. I was like probably 4 years old. And then I started playing drums a little bit.
You're actually, I mean, you're a singer, but you're actually a drummer.
I was started off as a drummer.
Yeah.
Becoming a singer was just, it kind of happened organically, but that's later on in life. Up at the remember Sequoia Arena in Oakland Hills?
Yes, I do.
Did you ever gig there at all?
I don't remember gigging there, but I remember it.
Well, I wasn't even in Blind Illusion yet. We had started a band like in junior high. It was me and Alvin Petty and
was
Mark
that
Biederman.
Your first band that you did?
That was our first band. It was me and Mark and Alvin Petty, Mark Biederman, and actually it was me and Alvin. I had my drums and he had his guitar, and we took my drums to his house, and Mark came over to spend the weekend, you know, because he lived in San Pablo at that time. He moved away, and he came back over to spend the weekend with Alvin, and he was like, I want to be in the band. And we're like, well, you don't play an instrument. And he's like, well, I'll get a bass. And he got a bass, and these guys that owned a record store down the street from where he lived were musicians. So they started giving him lessons, and he's so freaking bright, he picked up that bass quick.
He's bright.
And then he started playing guitar. And by 16, he was like the best guitar player I knew.
Sure he was.
You know, and that's where it started. We had a falling out in junior high, so then I left that whole thing, and they got Brett Hearn playing drums, and the band took a lot of different turns, and they had different singers. And I was playing drums for another band, which became Paradox, which became Hex. During that time, we would practice at Chris Olson's house. He was our bass player in that band. And Brett Hearn, the drummer for Blind Illusion, worked on the weekends. And Biederman would come up the hill where Chris lived and get me and go, hey, man, there's this party it's, so and so's house, and Brett has to work. You want to bring your drums? We'll jam. They're gonna pay us in like weed and whatever it was,
nice.
And we would jam. We would just free form jam, and we did that. And then we had a party at my buddy's house one night, and after the party was over, I was singing along to something that we were playing, and Mark was like, "Hey man, you sound pretty good." And I'm like, "Yeah man." I was drunk. I was like, "I'll sing for your band," and he was like, "What?" He goes, "You think so?" I'm like, "Yeah, why not?" And the next morning he called me. He's like, "Were you serious?" I'm like, "Serious about what?" And he's like, "Singing for Blind Illusion." I'm like, yeah. But I had sang at Sequoia Arena. I'm all over the place, all over the map.
That's okay.
But at Sequoia Arena, before I was in Blind Illusion, we were all kind of hanging out, and this guy, one of our friends, came over. "Hey man, there's a big party at Sequoia Arena, and there's a bunch of musicians up there. It's a free jam, and they have drum sets. They have all the stuff. You guys want to come up and jam?" So we went up there, and Mark played. There was a bunch of local guys from Oakland, and I played drums on a few songs. And then they needed somebody to sing Iron Man. I'm like, "I know that song," and that's the first time I sang in front of people, like really sang in front of people. And that feeling, and I know you know it.
You're a singer, you know it.
I kind of fucking like that. It was kind of cool.
How old were you at this time? What year are we talking about?
I was probably 16 years old.
Remember some 1980, 1979?
I was before that. 70. I'm 56, so.
So you're 2 years older than you're 1978.
Yeah, about 78.
78. Now, the music at that time, basically, I mean, the heavy stuff anyway is Zeppelin, Aerosmith, Rainbow, UFO, Ted Nugent, AC/DC, Black Sabbath, obviously, Sabbath, Scorpions. If you knew about that type of stuff at that time, were you listening to that stuff at that time?
Yeah.
You were?
Yeah.
All of that stuff?
Yeah, all that stuff.
Uh-huh.
Deep Purple.
Obviously,
I was a big Beatles fan, but also,
So am I to this day.
Deep Purple, Thin Lizzy, that kind of stuff.
Right.
Kirk Hammett's the one that turned me on to UFO. I jammed with him. Him and Carlton came over. They were looking for this before Tom, and I jammed with them. I didn't know Kirk that well, and he was like, "You ever heard of UFO?" I'm like, "No," and he gave me the Force It record.
Oh, really?
And that's when I was like, "Whoa, this is awesome."
Yeah, it's good shit.
Yeah. And Sabbath, I saw Sabbath on the Never Say Die tour in '78, and with Van Halen.
I was there too. Actually. Yeah. At the Coliseum.
That was life changing.
Yeah, that was great. What a great show.
Oh God, yeah. It was life changing. But yeah, Zeppelin, all that kind of stuff. Me and Mark, and I mean, all our group of friends. And then I remember when like Rush came into the fold, and Scorpions. I remember our friends came over. "Check this out. This is Scorpions." And I remember, listening to it and going, "Man, that one singer's killer. What's that other guy?"
So now, you're about 16. You're in a band. It's 1978. The new wave of British heavy metal hasn't necessarily happened yet, but you're playing the harder rock songs. When did you start listening to that? When it came out, were you right on it, or did you stay pretty much with the the classic stuff?
Oh, you mean like 70s? With the metal transition?
Yeah, as the metal transition came
well,
through.
It's a
and how was your metal transition as a vocalist?
I would say, Blind Illusion, we kind of considered ourselves metal, but it wasn't like, there wasn't really, that metal thing wasn't really happening so much yet. And I remember even was Kirk was like, talking about Iron Maiden, and I was like,
right.
"Oh, what?
Right.
Okay, check these guys out," kind of thing. So
which was 1980, right? So still, but you guys are, if you're playing with Biederman in 78, your hardest influences are probably Sabbath and like,
Zeppelin,
Aerosmith, Ted Nugent, AC/DC, that sort of thing. So definitely the hard rock route.
Right. But there was some little sprinkles of things, like I said, like Thin Lizzy was, because we get a little bit of that here.
Everybody, every one of us, come on.
Yeah.
Yeah, I did a whole episode on them, and I love Thin Lizzy. It's, we're all big fans. I think any musician from our era in metal, thrash metal, hard rock, pays so much homage to Thin Lizzy as structure for them. I can think of so many vocal things that I've done that I attribute to Phil,
Right.
So,
well, that's for me too. Like later on, starting, writing for Heathen and everything, just the way he wrote, melody, that kind of stuff. Is, as I grew as a musician, a songwriter, and listening to different music and really like absorbing how people write and how he put it together. It was such poetry. It really, really spoke to me, and I try on some stuff, try to write kind of like that, but in heathen, it's a different animal. So, and I would say talking
an animal.
talking about that transition. When I left Blind Illusion, we were going more metal, which I actually, the original lineup with Les Claypool and Brian Kehoe and Brett Hearn and I and Mark was something of itself, and heavy but just super musical. When that band disbanded, I remember all of a sudden, and we had been trying to get into the clubs, the Keystone, and they were playing the Knack and all that stuff, and they just looked at us like we were a bunch of kids, and KRQR started doing this thing with Bill Graham, the Metal Monday thing. And that's where it really started. Yeah. And we had our demo played on KSL.
Did you guys ever do the old Waldorf in Metal Monday?
Yeah, we did.
You did.
But I went to the first show that I went to. I was dating Kirk's sister, and we went to see Exodus, and they were playing with Alma Chorus. And so we went to support Exodus, and then I saw Alma Chorus for the first time. And they were kind of progressive, and it was kind of that. They were kind of more like what Blind Illusion did,
Yeah, definitely. I agree with that.
Yeah, so I called Mark the next day. I'm like, dude, we got to put the band back together. And he's like, I said, I went to the show and blah, blah, blah. And it just grew. And we got new band members.
What year was this around? 81, 82?
It was about, 82, 83.
Yeah, 82, 83.
Yeah, I think.
Yeah, because Metal Mondays was... Yeah, about 82, 83. It was because it was Queenie Taylor and Tony Isabella. Tony, she did it.
Yeah.
So, I knew about that. I wasn't obviously in Exodus for another 3 years, but I still went to the first time I saw Metallica was at Metal Mondays.
Yeah,
so
me too.
I think opening for Law's Rocket, maybe. I think maybe.
Oh, yeah.
I don't think they headlined. I think it was.
I think they did headline. I
first time?
I want to say Exodus played that show too. But
Did they?
I don't remember. It's a long time ago.
We're talking about 38, almost 39 years ago, bro.
But I saw that show, and that was with the original Metallica band.
Yeah, right.
With Dave and everything.
Right, with Dave. Yeah.
Yeah, and I remember going, whoa, these guys.
And Ron on bass, Ron McGovney on
exactly.
bass, right? Yeah, I saw that. It's like, yeah.
Yeah, and then the Keystone Berkeley's,
right,
or the Keystones all opened
Stones,
it up.
Palo Alto,
that started happening.
So that was great.
Yeah,
everybody was. I remember the first time I saw Saxon was for Denim and Leather tour, and they played Berkeley one night, the Stone one night, and then the Berkeley, and then Keystone Palo Alto. They did the tour of the Keystones, when they hear, and I didn't know. I was just some little kid fan going, tonight they're going to be at here. Last night they're at this Stone, and then they're this Stone. I didn't even know. And that's what got me into. Once I went there, somebody handed me a fucking flyer. I was like, what's this? Oh, what? More metal shows than this? Because, I lived out here, and we were cut off to a lot of what was going on over the hill. There was no internet, you know what I mean?
Right,
so
yeah.
Who knew what was going on? So
yeah, that was an interesting time because the first, I think we did... I want to say that our first gig when we put the band back together, Blind Illusion, I think we got a show at the MAB, the Mabuhay Gardens. And
we played with Legacy. Legacy and Blind Illusion played together at the MAB.
Was it at the MAB?
Yes.
I thought our first gig together was at Ruthie's.
I'm not saying it's the first gig together, but I remember doing the MAB early on in Legacy with Blind Illusion, and I seen the fucking flyer recently.
Oh, wow.
And that's how I remembered that show.
I might have that flyer.
And it was like, and it's like,
that's a trip.
Has the Legacy led the circle, and the when we just got it, Blind Illusion there, and I was at the MAB. Yeah.
Wow. Well, that first show we did, Ness booked us on this weird show, and there was this a John androgynous guy that came up there, and he had it was almost like a DJ, and was like these bands played after us. And after we played, he came up to us and he's like, "Oh, you guys definitely metal.
Yeah,
you guys. I'll book you later."
I remember Ness. Wow, that's kind of like Wes Robinson. You know what I mean? That kind of thing.
A person from the past. But then, we got our first Waldorf show was opening for Griffin and Tyrant. I think that was our first
Ricky
one.
Ratto and Tyrant. And,
remember those guys?
Yeah, I do remember.
They were good. They were good.
Yeah, they were. They were I thought he was like Steven Tyler back then,
Yeah. And that's where I met Yaz.
Uh-huh.
I come walking in, and I was wearing a Schenker shirt.
Yeah, because he was in Griffin at that time.
Guitar player, yeah.
But he played guitar. He didn't play bass.
Yeah, he played guitar.
Yeah.
Yeah. He had his Schenker shirt on. I had a Schenker shirt on, and he was like, hey, who are you? And that's where we met. That was the first time.
Yeah.
I never knew that, we'd end up being in a band together. But
Wild times with Yaz.
Exactly. Hell yeah.
Very much wild times with Yaz. Too bad some of those guys that we had wild times with just aren't around anymore.
Yeah.
Miss that fucking guy, man. He was cool as hell.
Well, you remember the time that when we did
Vakken, and remember the pilot comes out to us and goes, "You better sober this guy up, or none of you are getting on the plane." And I'm like, "Yes, I don't care how much fucking coffee you need to drink. I gotta go home. I had to go to work. Remember, I was doing Exodus and working, and I had to be on the job at like 7 hours after that plane landed, let alone miss the flight. You know what I mean? And I couldn't afford that. I was like, I got to be on this fucking flight. You fuck me. And however they let him on, and it was. Well,
the story goes. When you remember, we're all kicking back, and he was a mess, and he was like sleeping all over everything.
Yeah, well, everything.
Yeah, and then they were like, we could hear the grumblings, and then we're like, dude, go clean up, man. And he goes away, and that guy came up to us.
Your friend is too drunk,
he's
right?
He's like, I don't think I'm gonna let you guys fly today. And we're like, what? He's like, you guys are drunk. We're like, no, we're not drunk. It's just one guy. We played a show last night, and he's like, okay. And we said, we'll take care of it. It'll be fine. And then remember, he walks out, and he's all got to slicked his hair back with water.
Right.
He walks up to that guy, and he goes, am I the man in question? The guy he goes, yes, you are. And but then Lee tells me when we got on the plane, Yaz was all bummed out because they were like, we're not going to serve you, you know.
Oh, that's right. I do remember that.
And then he's on the other side of the plane. And he's like, party's over. And Lee's like, no, it's not. And he's like, 2 vodkas. And then he got him, and he looked over at me at the other side because I was pissed at him, you know. He's all, I'm like, fuck you, you asshole.
Hot.
Yeah. But they kept his passport and ID. I don't know if you remember that.
I don't remember that.
Yeah. When we got to New York, he got stuck for a little while. And I was like, fuck you, asshole.
Yeah, I'm out.
Stay in New York, bitch.
Wow.
But that was, But yeah, he was always wild.
Always wild. So how long more did you guys keep Blind Illusion running? Because I remember when we were recording Pleasures of the Flesh, the band was in the studio.
I was in Heathen already.
You were in Heathen already. When did you leave Blind Illusion?
86.
86. And you started Heathen with Doug and Lee that year?
86. Yeah. I actually was going to audition for Ruffian. And
for Ruffians?
Yeah,
really?
Ruffians. And I went to Craig's house to pick up the record, and I saw Leah there. And she's like, what's going on? I'm like, I'm going to audition for these guys. And she's like, my boyfriend's got a new band, and they're looking for a singer. And she gave him my number, and then I didn't get the Ruffians gig, and then I started jamming with Heathen. That was Eric Wong too.
Right.
Eric
yeah,
Wong.
because the album came out pretty quickly out of
within
87,
the year,
right?
Within the year. And we were Tony was managing us too. And we, because she was busy with you guys, it was like getting kind of, and then we found this other guy to manage us, and that was a nightmare. But
talk about the first record, because Breaking the Silence had you had a pretty named producer on that album,
Ronnie Montrose.
I don't know if that did you guys any good or not. You know what I mean? As a vocalist, I don't know how that worked for you, because he's a but talk about the recording process on that.
Yeah, well, we, our manager knew Ronnie, and suggested that, and both Yaz and I, we're old school rockers.
Of course you are.
We're like, that'd be great. Lee and Doug were like kind of anti. He doesn't know anything about metal.
Warner Brothers presents Montrose.
Yeah, but Lee and Doug were right. They were they were like skeptical that he didn't know anything really much about metal, and it started off great. The guy was cool. We did the drum tracks at Studio D. Got great drum tones, amazing drum tones, like.
Everybody goes to Studio D to get the damn drum tones. You know that.
But then we got in the studio at Music Annex, and then all of a sudden he decided towards the end of things that he was going to listen to some Metallica and listen to some Megadeth, and then he was like, "Well, these drums sound like the Metallica's drums," and we're like, "Yeah, they do." They kind of had that.
Yeah.
And he's like, "We can't have that," and he destroyed the tones. And
why would he do that?
I have no idea.
And again, it's your first record and your kids, and you don't know what the fuck,
Exactly. He was like, trust me, I'm a professional. When I did vocal tracks, I had recorded before, but I was still fairly green.
Sure,
he's telling me, oh, that's, he's like, I do a take, and he's like, okay, let's do it again. And he would he kept taking takes, but then I thought I was going to double stuff. He's like, oh no, I got a doubling machine. I can do. It was just a mess. And at the end of things, like, don't worry, trust me, I'm a professional.
I love. Don't worry, I'm a professional. We'll fix it in the mix.
Oh yeah, he convinced Yaz that his rough tracks that he did when we did the drums were good enough. And Yaz was like, really? So he never redid his bass tracks for the.
Really?
Yeah, to save time. He was trying to save time, in the budget. And I can only imagine why he did that. But anyway,
I'm sure
it was not, and we were not involved in the first mix. He didn't.
Why?
Because he didn't want us there.
Not one person of you. I can't see Lee Altus letting that go.
Well, at the time, after we heard his mix, and he was so proud of, we were like, no. And then he would only have Lee and Doug there, and we're still. I mean, I'm proud of the record, but
I like the record too. I'm sorry, it's not necessarily chunky, but I love the record. You know what I mean?
I think it's
good songs.
It's got some good songs,
great songs.
But the production could have been.
Well, we always say that about
Sure.
everything. If I look at there's some Exodus records where the production impact is so guitar heavy. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's just like there's no. We've talked about that. We learn things as kids. We learn things as younger guys. Everybody. Oh, what we did on this record, we may not do on that record. What we may have done on this record, we may not have done on that. It's like, I think you were looking for the formula, to whereas now we know what the formula is.
Sure.
We know how it works. Okay, so the machine goes like this. He cooks it up. When he cooks it up, we sprinkle a little bit of this on it. When that gets sprinkled, we send. And we didn't know that back then. We figured, oh, fuck it.
Right.
Just keep writing songs and we go for what we know instead of trying to actually, have an agenda and go, okay, this is we're going to play it like this, do it like this. You know what I mean? So I think it's a lot different now. And even though when you're a kid, you look up to somebody like Ronnie Montrose, you're going to say, wow, I mean, he has one of the best records, best hard rock songs to ever go down in the world. He worked with one of the best vocalists.
Absolutely. Okay,
cool. You what's good for Sammy's good for me.
Right.
You know what I mean? And then you're going like this, yeah, well, and then final mixes, and you kind of have to, fuck it, trust him on it, It's kind of like, well, we hired him. This is what it is, you know what I mean? On your first one anyway. By now it's like...
Right. And it's definitely a learning experience. And it was a valuable lesson for me never to trust anybody. Like, make sure that I'm happy. If I'm happy, then that's good. If it's not what I want it to be, then... Let's fix it.
Well, of course, if you have the power to do so, if it's on you, you know what I mean. You're the vocalist,
sure.
You know the vocal part, and go, you know what, like this. But I mean, I work, Gary and even Andy Sneap, and they'll listen to stuff and go, Zet, do it like this or something. I'm never going, you know what? No, I don't like it like that. I like it this way. I'm always open to go. Right. Okay, cool. Yeah. I'll try it. If it doesn't work, it doesn't. It works. It works. That's what we're here doing, kind of making it work. Did you guys? You released in '87. How much touring did you do? Because you were on Combat as well, right?
Yeah. Well, we only for that record we went out. We did some shows in L.A. And then we had management issues and booking agency issues.
A lot of bands did at that time. There was so much trouble. I mean, everybody band, it seemed we were tied up in a thing with Torrid Records. Death Angel was tied up. I mean, they're constant legal. Everybody, it seems like every one of us had a legal, even Testament. Everybody had their own little legal problems.
Yeah, and I think it's across the board. It's just can be such a nasty business sometimes. But we
didn't know it was a business, Dave. We came into it as a little kid, wanted to be rock stars, and then we're like, what?
Yeah,
what do you mean? What?
Rock and roll dreams. Yeah.
And then you got to remember that you have to, definitely make it. It's music, but it's a business, and you will get swallowed whole like a shark. Boom, done. If you're not paying attention.
We're still standing though.
No, exactly. That's the attest of time. You know what I mean? You guys are still standing strong too.
Yeah. Well, we did an American tour with Zetro, and that was
out of Chicago.
That was in the fall. Yeah, did that. And then it took a little time to work out. We got a new label with Roadrunner, and
they were just starting out at that time too, right?
They'd been around for a little while. It was Road Racer, and then turned into Roadrunner. And then we did Victims of Deception. And
but it was a 4-year wasn't it 91 was Victims of
Victims,
Deception?
yeah.
Right?
There was a hiatus.
So 4 years there. What happened? Just legal problems?
Management issues and label issues.
Lineup changes at that time?
A little bit. Doug came and he left and came back. And when we got the Sepultura tour, he was like, "Hey, I want back in," and we took him out on tour. But yeah, we went through some stuff, with Combat. Some of it was sort of self-inflicted, on our end, and
some of us was ours too. I mean, they had signed a deal with Torrid Record, or that was just like something you just don't do,
right.
what I mean? But who knew? We're going to do a record. Fuck it. Where do I sign? You know what I mean?
Right. Well, Combat actually took good care of
it. They did.
We just had bad advice from the manager that we had, and it caused us problems. And because we listened to him, and we probably should have, stuck to our gut and hung with Combat and did, finished out our whole deal. We had a 3-album deal with them.
Yeah, we did. Yeah, we did before we went to Capitol as well. And Combat took care of us.
Yeah.
I mean, they knew what they were doing. We did good tours with Combat, Celtic Frost, Anthrax, Halloween, Headbangers Ball. We did good stuff with Combat. You know what I mean? Really so cool. Combat was really behind Exodus at that time. So, they did good stuff. When, another label that isn't with us anymore.
Right.
So what happened? What was the difference when you went to Roadrunner?
Well, I mean, that was actually short-lived. We did a tour with Sepultura, went to Europe, and it was a great tour. Came back to basically metal was sort of dead. The whole grunge thing had kind of taken over.
We know.
And
we were victims of it.
Yeah, we all were.
Yeah.
And then Lee had an opportunity to go
Die Krupps
thing. So here we were, 5 years of him being gone. And
right.
I did a couple things. I worked with some of the guys from Defiance, and it became Inner Threshold. Did that for a while.
What year are we talking about, Dave?
Oof, that was 93.
93
or so, something like that, when I joined with those guys. And then Lee came back, and we talked about trying to do something.
And what year was that when he came back? Because it was probably 99, 2000, right? Or even after that? It was
getting close to, well, I'd say 98? Is that right?
Uh-huh.
Yeah, 98, because it was like, it wasn't really going anywhere. And then Walter gave us a call.
Right, and everybody got that call. It's funny how everybody's coming here and give us your version of the call.
Well, I didn't get the call. Lee got the call. But, we had a brother that needed our help. Everybody's come in and talked about it. It's great. Yeah, and so he's like, could you guys reform and do the show?
And at this point, how long had you guys not played together as a band?
Not since 93.
Since 93.
Yeah.
Wow. So you're talking 9 years, probably 8 years?
Yeah,
it's 2001.
Yeah, a long time. And then Lee and I, when we talked about it, we're like, we're not doing it unless Yaz does it. So we got to find Yaz, And
what was Yaz doing at that time, Dave?
He wasn't in a great way.
Yeah.
He wasn't in a great way.
Yeah, I remember that.
But he was standing, and he definitely was in, and he was hilarious through the whole process, but that's what sparked it for all of us, I think, for, a lot of bands, Death Angel,
Exodus, for sure.
Yeah. I mean, it was a big deal.
There was a couple of bands that said, kind of like went, hey.
Well, metal was back.
We could still do this. Did you see that crowd out there? So it was kind of cool. I think that kind of set that wave.
Well, an interesting story. My son was young. He was born 2 weeks after we finished the first record, right? So, and then we did a couple of records, but he was young, and then there was no Heathen as he was getting older and more conscious of things. And, he would see different things, but didn't really realize what the
magnitude it was.
Right. And so,
Cody and Nick too, though, Dave.
Right. And so here, this Thrash of the Titans is coming up, and I'm talking about it. You got to come. He's like 14. I'm like, you got to come. It's going to be a big show. And he's like, yeah, Dad. Yeah, you're old now. And then I kept running into people, and I ran into you out here at the fireworks.
Fireworks stand. That's right. Yes,
and you're like, hey, Dave, it's going to be a great show. It's going to be epic.
Yeah, that's right.
And Trevor's like, I'm like, that's the singer from Exodus. He's like, you know him? I'm like, yeah, and he's like, oh, okay. And it was building.
Yeah, right.
And then we took him to the rehearsals, and everybody was there, and he got to meet John Tempesta, and he was like, and he plays with, what was it? Was he playing with White Zombie at the time?
Yes, yeah.
And he's like, and John came up, gave me a big hug, and Trevor.
Because it was with Exits that Tom was at that time.
Right, but he was there. And
yes.
he was like, Dave, what's up? Give me a big hug. And I'm like, Trevor, and Trevor's like, now he's like going, whoa, whoa, whoa. And then he came to the show, and he stayed with me all night. Like, at one point,
my kids were running around all over the place.
Yeah,
Cody and Nick and Cody Billy.
Yeah.
And who else had their kids? There was like 5 of them running around. Billy Milano brought them up on stage during the SOD set and was like, he even asked my son, how old are you? And Cody's like, 11. He goes, 11. Like ripping on him. It was great. My kids were like, they were actually, people were like, you're Zetro's kids? Like, yeah, will you sign this? My kid, Nick, he's 8 years old. He goes, Dad, some guy asked me to sign my name on something. I'm all, really? Wow, 8 years old signing your first autograph. People were they came all over the world for that thing. Sure. And they were very excited for what was going on there. And it did kind of reignite. Because, Anthrax had never stopped doing it. You know what I mean? There was a few bands that had never really stopped. Testament had never really stopped, because they did. It was Legacy that night. It was no Testament about other than Chuck coming out and singing one song. But there was, it seemed like that's when everybody kind of went,
yeah,
dust this off. I think we can do this again, can't we, fellas?
Well, it wasn't Death Angel. Those guys were doing was it not the organization?
They were doing the Swarm.
Was it Swarm?
Yeah. And then that's when they looked at each other's face and said, we could do this. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that kind of went from there. Now, did you guys form?